Hello, everybody, and welcome to Positive Fandom. I'm your host, RM, and of course, with us, we have Catherine Cooke here for this Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 7 spoiler. It's been a little while, Catherine. How have you been?
Good. You too?
Yeah, I've been great. As you know, I've been away and it's been hard for me to kind of schedule everything. So I apologize for the time of this and kind of the last minute. You asked me about this. I said I wasn't going to do it. But I was supposed to go to the British Museum today, and there was something called an industrial action, which means the museum workers went on strike. So a few days ago, when I literally rode in front of the museum, everybody was going in, everything looked fine. So I was quite surprised to see they were closed. So I changed some of my plans tonight. But Catherine, I have to tell you, that this season of The Mandalorian has been very unusual. A lot of people are questioning it, but honestly, after seeing this last episode, um, I'm wondering how they're going to top it, since we know there's one more episode to come. Um, the episode is called Spies. And right away, we've already known that there was a spy in our midst with Kale, who is the officer who's loyal to Moff Gideon. And of course, it starts where we're back on Coruscant. She's giving him a report. We see this cool scene of her in front of his Imperial droid that's, normally we see all the time. I didn't know that they could even do what we saw, but it looks really amazing. Um, what are your thoughts about Kale spilling the beans for the Mandalorians, pretty much siding up with the Navarians, I guess you want to call them that. Um, what are your thoughts about her just pretty much telling him everything?
Well,
Boy, when I heard that, my heart sank.
I wonder where she's getting the information because she's on Coruscant and has been there. It's like, okay, you shut down Dr. Pershing, but he didn't have any relationship to the Mandalorian. So how does she know all this? So that was a bit. It's like, okay, so there must be a spy somewhere that, hence the title that we're not aware of yet. Because otherwise, why does she know all this?
Yeah, it's a really good question, something I think we could get an answer to or need to get an answer to because it seems like she has access to so much more than what I thought she would have access to. What doesn't she have access to? It just seemed like she was friends with the people who erased Dr. Pershing's or were trying to kind of um readjust him with a lobotomy. But now maybe she has full access and we don't even know. It is very disturbing in a sense. She seems to know everything. And so when she told Moff Gideon that, I really, my heart was just like, oh no, why did they have to find out at all? It would have been nice for the Mandalorians to kind of have this advantage at least once in this get go. And then, of course, we see this incredibly cool scene with Gideon kind of walking into this chamber where he's having a meeting. I had no idea, Catherine, that there were so many people involved in this military action. Were you expecting to see this group of people known as the Shadow Collective or Shadow Council, rather? And were you also expecting to see Moff Gideon walk by what looked like giant tubes or chambers of uh, something inside of those tubes? What were your thoughts about that? I think you're still muted.
I expected him to have a collective of people somewhere because he's obviously working with somebody, and the Dark Troopers. It's like, okay, he's got more Dark Troopers now. The continuation of the cloning thing, which he tries to blame the other guy for, saying you're the one obsessed with cloning, and it's like, well, actually, you're the one obsessed with it because you're the one still doing it. So yeah, I figured there would be a collective out there somewhere, but I still don't understand why. Like his escape seems really contrived. Like how is it that Bo-Katan frankly didn't just kill Gideon at the end of season 2? It's like what, she's not part of the New Republic. She doesn't obey their laws. Why does she care about sending him, trusting him to go to trial, and let alone trusting them to get him back to court as opposed to following him there? Because you had Carson Teva find the remains of the escape craft or the shuttlecraft or whatever, and Gideon was missing. And I'm like, how is this not like the Mandalorians knew about this, but they just kind of let oh man, the New Republic can handle it. So that was a little weird. So the fact that he's found, I think it's surprising that his headquarters is actually on Mandalore, as it seems, because we see that he does have all the new Dark Troopers and the bombers and all that stuff there. So that was a bit of a surprise.
Yeah. Excuse me. Absolutely. And we are going to talk about that because it was just such a shock to see um, how far and what was there. And it also made me wonder why didn't hadn't noticed that when he went to the planet. I mean, it's a big planet, but how could you hide something so big? So, it was really interesting this Shadow Council and how they were bickering over Thrawn. Thrawn's name was dropped like a bazillion times. Um, why do you think Gideon lied about not having access to the research anymore when clearly we know Kale grabbed that research? Um, why would he lie about Project Necromancer?
Because I think he has his own ambitions that don't involve the others. It's like he's willing to ask them for help a few times when he needs it, but like he's saying, where's Thrawn? You guys keep talking about him as your ace in the hole, but nobody knows where he is, and he's not really here to help us now. So he's like, I'm gonna take care of this myself then. And again, he has his own ambitions and things he wants to do. Like even when you see his full outfit that he's made, like he says that he wants to create the new Mandalore, like after him, and you see that he's fashioned his own Mandalorian helmet with the horns on it, and like he says, the Dark Troopers now include some of his own DNA as well. So it's like he's trying to create a new power based around him. So he's kind of egotistical in that sense. Like I don't get the feeling that he wants to ally with the other Imperial warlords. Like he'll use them as long as he needs to, but then he'd probably throw them under the bus. So he's going to keep some things secret from them.
And why isn't Thrawn there? Like, why aren't we seeing him when we're hearing so much about him? Do you think?
I think that's all going to boil down to where Ezra took him at the end of Rebels, because it's only been about like a decade in the storyline between his disappearance and where we are now. So I mean, I don't know where he would have taken him, somewhere into the unknown regions, but did Thrawn get away and reform the Chiss Ascendancy? Who knows? I mean, we'll find out in August when Ahsoka drops, but it is a good question. Like, where's he been for the last 10 years? What's he doing? And is he just somebody that the other Imperial warlords are just hoping with a fool's hope that they can rely on? Because I don't get the sense that Thrawn cares about them either.
Yeah, and I somehow don't think Thrawn cares or needs anybody, but it seems like this council, Gideon has a desire to really kind of want to be the leader. He stresses how important it is since he is present and Thrawn isn't, that he should be the leader. And obviously, I think that it's clear he wants to kind of wipe out all the Mandalorians, but it doesn't seem like he has any fighter forces, nor does he have any guards. He asked for these 3 Praetorian guards. Why doesn't Gideon have any more forces?
Well, I think it's because he's relying instead on the Dark Troopers that he has, because he had quite a lot of them there, and then he had, plus the Praetorians, and so he's probably has more of them hidden in that complex somewhere that we haven't seen yet. That we'll probably learn more about in the finale. But I think it's also because he doesn't want to rely on the other warlords if he doesn't have to, because he knows that they're in the mood for making treaties with the Republic. They have this naive idea that there's still millions, if not billions, of people loyal to the Empire out there on every Imperial planet that are gonna join them. And Gideon's like, no, I'm not into this. I'd rather rule my own, be king of my own domain, and he doesn't really want to use them if he doesn't have to. So I think because it did seem like he had pretty formidable forces there on Mandalore, because that was just the first few that we saw in the cave. So there's probably more.
Yeah, after seeing what we saw, I wonder what exactly his resources are. And I think it's really interesting because when the Mandalorians kind of are on let's say heading towards Navarro, I guess, for one last time before they head out, um we see Grogu sitting on Bo-Katan's lap as they're kind of about to land on Navarro, and we get maybe one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Essentially, I didn't know that they were going to do this with this IG unit,
Yeah.
but for those of us who have watched the episode, and guys, this is a spoiler review. Um, we saw something that I couldn't even have imagined, which was sort of a mechanical robot version of an IG-11. They're calling an IG-12. Grogu uses it to kind of move around, and he has yes and no buttons, which is hilarious.
I was gonna say real quick. I agree with Gary's comment right here. Could we have had a whole season starting from here, please? Yes, because this whole season's been a wash.
Yeah, this has been one of the lowest rated Mandalorian seasons. It's been one of the least watched ones. I was at Star Wars Celebration this weekend, and someone did ask me, "Do you want to see the next episode of The Mandalorian? I heard it's fantastic." And I wasn't a taker because I was like, "Yeah, I don't know. I'm not really that enthused, but I think that if they showed that episode to everybody at Star Wars Celebration, this would have been like the biggest roar and just screams about how cool this episode was. I think it would have been just such a success and such a triumph for all the 501st people, all the cosplayers who do Mandalorian cosplay. This was really their moment to shine. And I'm kind of curious as to why they kind of made it an exclusive. I kind of feel like they should have just gone for it. But yeah, it does feel like we're finally getting into the nitty gritty of The Mandalorian season 3, because everything before that, honestly, it was a bit soap opera ish. But
A lot
they
of filler and a lot of, especially last week was so bad. It's like I thought, okay, they're at the point where they're just giving celebrities roles in Star Wars because they want to be in it, whether they can act or not. And it's like, uh, yeah, no, it's like we could have gotten like the first episode was like a check-in episode. The second one was sort of like a half episode. The third one was like all that stuff with Pershing that amounted to nothing because they just brainwashed, because they wiped his memory, so it was kind of a waste. And then the fourth episode was the Land of the Lost thing, where they only really gave you half of the Grogu escape story. And then the fifth one was the pirate episode, which you could have had that be in the first one if you wanted. And then last week, so it's like they're right. Like the season feels like this is the conflict that we were promised that season 3 was going to be. It was going to be retake Mandalore and all this, and here we're at the end of season 3, and it's only now are they just getting around to it. So it's really just as good as this episode was. I thought it was really disappointing because this is the type of quality I expected for the whole season.
Yeah, I agree, Catherine. I think that we've kind of missed out on a lot of opportunities for what could have been a much stronger series and season for The Mandalorian. And a lot of things happen in this episode that I'm trying to figure out how they're going to wrap up in one episode after this. They get onto Mandalore, which we've been on a few times now. We know what Mandalore looks like. And suddenly they come across other Mandalorians. Were you surprised by these Mandalorians, um,
I
Catherine?
guess the fact that they're well, not really. It's like okay, there might be some stragglers there still, just kind of around, but because they didn't see, they didn't they apparently didn't run into Din Djarin and Bo-Katan when they came earlier. So okay, there's some stragglers still out there. It's like okay,
Well, this is something that makes me wonder exactly how many Mandalorians are left. Like, I just can't believe that it's only, the ones that we see. There must be many more Mandalorians. How are you going to populate an entire planet with so few? There must be many more. So, I have to wonder whether or not they are aware that there are more factions of Mandalorians, either on Concordia, which is the surrounding moon, or some other places. But something else that was very interesting is that this is the first time in a long time that I actually noticed Bo-Katan smiling when she lands on Mandalore and talks about taking Mandalore back. Did you notice a change in her demeanor, Catherine, as she landed on Mandalore with this quest now with the dark saber in her hand?
a little bit.
Yeah, and, something else too, which was very interesting, was the fact that these Mandalorians that she hasn't seen, or maybe they haven't seen her in years, are suddenly loyal to her, saying, "Oh, this is Lady Bo-Katan." And we get the bombshell, Catherine. We find out exactly how Moff Gideon ended up getting the dark saber. Were you surprised that Bo-Katan surrendered, because it feels very unlike a Mandalorian to do something like that?
Yeah, it's surprising, particularly from her, and I would have loved to see the flashback of that, the whole Night of a Thousand Tears. It's like, okay, so you surrendered when you were out of forces, and then they reneged on the deal, which, yeah, it's expected that they would do that. But I was more interested in everybody else's response when she said that. They were all kind of like, huh? Everybody gave her like the armor, Din and Axe, and everybody just kind of look out. Casca, they're all like looking at her like, what? You did what? You know? And so that was like they gained this newfound respect at the same time.
Yeah, and, my first thought was, I hope she doesn't make the same mistake twice. That was my first thought, because that could make a very quick ending to this series or even, going forward here. But, if the essentially, with this newfound faction of Mandalorians, we don't have a name for them, or maybe there is a name for them, but, um, some of them are so weak that they have to go back to the covert and, kind of like get medical attention. And the armorer flies back to the fleet, that's hovering the planet. And my first thought was, gee, I sure hope she doesn't, go through the atmosphere and find, an entire Imperial fleet there. They weren't there at that moment. They're probably there right outside because we all are expecting an ambush or a trap or something because we know Moff knows about this. But what was interesting was that at some point, someone questioned the armorer and asked her if she was in Death Watch. And she made kind of a sly remark saying, well, Death Watch doesn't exist anymore. We've broken up into different factions. She didn't deny being part of Death Watch. But is Catherine, and I kind of feel like it is the identity of the armorer important somehow?
It might be because she might have been another member of Death Watch, but like they were saying, the whole issue with Mandalorians is that they're always fighting each other, and they get all self-righteous about what type of what culture they're, what side of the culture they fall into, even though at the end of the day it really shouldn't matter. Like even when Axe and Paz get into that argument and start fighting, and it's like, really, it's like you're gonna do this now after what Bo-Katan had just talked about and what the armor had talked about, and maybe she's somebody, maybe she's not. I don't recall seeing her amongst the Death Watch in the Clone Wars, but it wouldn't be too surprising because Paz Vizsla and his before him Pre Vizsla was from Death Watch, so I would expect them to possibly have come from that faction as well.
Yeah, it is something to think about. Certainly, they didn't forget about Bo Katan. And I guess maybe she thought people had forgotten about her. And she did have this guilt of the fact that she surrendered and having, been honest with everyone, knowing that she surrendered and that Moff Gideon went ahead and slaughtered everybody anyway, does kind of change things quite a bit for her, at least. At least she doesn't feel like she's hiding anything. Now, Bo-Katan at some point has a question of whether or not she can actually go through with all this. Can she really reunite the factions? And we see Djarin go ahead and say, her song hasn't been sung and that he's pledged his life to her or whatever. Um, yeah, I wasn't surprised to hear that at all. But it did feel a little bit more than just sort of like him pledging his loyalty to her. I think he was pretty much saying that he would die for her. Is he more attached to Bo-Katan more than her just being his leader?
Uh, Probably because they've been on a few missions together, like he says, he's not one to subscribe to so much of the culture of the dark saber, because like you said, that doesn't mean anything to me. But what does mean something is loyalty, and because Bo-Katan has been loyal to him on each of their encounters, and he doesn't perceive her to be as volatile as the other Mandalorians see, then yes, he considers her more than just another person who he's serving under. He does respect her quite a lot.
Yeah, and I think I almost felt like he wanted to tell her this because he had an omen or he had some kind of feeling that things were not going to work out well for him. So he wanted to kind of clear the air and let her know that you know, supports her fully. Um, Grogu kind of interjects between this fight that you mentioned, Catherine, and all along I've been telling you that Grogu has to be here for a reason, and it's not good enough for Grogu to kind of just be hanging out and looking cute all the time, because we need to kind of like have his character have quite a bit of significance if he is supposed to be someone who is important, a Force user who can influence generations of other Force users, have a huge influence over the galaxy and what happens. What did you think about him trying to keep the peace? Are we going to see anything more important happen with Grogu this season?
Maybe not this season because there's only one episode left, and we seem to be in the middle of a combat type situation. But he does feel a bit of a third wheel at this point because again, his story ended at the end of season 2, and this is a total Disney thing bringing him back in because they want to sell more toys, kind of like with this ridiculous IG robot puppeteering thing, which I just thought was too goofy and just kind of interrupted the flow of the episode to do this kind of goofy thing where he's going through the market and he keeps hitting the button to say yes, yes over and over again, even though nobody's asking any questions of him. But then later he's shown to be smarter when he tells the guys to stop fighting. It's like, okay, so sometimes you're going to be ornery like a kid and other times you're not. It's like, and I don't really know why Din wanted to bring him down to Mandalore on this mission if they thought it might be dangerous. It's like, you could have stayed back with the covert and all the other children. Maybe it would have been safer, but okay. So they might find something for him to do because I remember Filoni said at Celebration now that the status of the series is that they're going to make as many as long as the fans like it, which I was a bit worried by because it's like, well, it's better to have a story written out and know where you're going with it. But as for whether he's going to do anything in the very next episode, maybe. But for the season, it's mostly been kind of. I mean, the whole season's kind of just been not much of a story. It's kind of like, here we are. It's just we're finally getting to where we wanted the season to start, really.
And of course, as OG fan, when Star Wars is just Star Wars, makes a point about how the episode is called Spies, and we did see one spy, as we mentioned earlier. Why does everybody feel that the armorer is a spy? Do you feel that way, Catherine?
She could be. I noticed that Gideon's helmet that he made for himself looks a lot like hers.
Yes, it has the horns on it and would indicate that they are in cahoots because we haven't seen anybody else with that particular helmet.
And,
Um,
and if they
uh,
are in league with each other, I don't think that it was something that's been going on for a long time because remember, he killed their entire covert almost back in season 1. So I think maybe he made a deal with her. It's like, hey, I'm going to be leading the new Mandalore, and I'll give you control, like the keys to the king, the keys to the forge, if you will. You could be the new armor for this new grand power of Mandalore if you join me. She could, because again,
yeah,
like the title said, spies plural, and we didn't really find out who that was. Because again, who's giving uh, the Cal or whatever her information to pass on to Gideon? Somebody in the covert is doing that, and it's like, well, it obviously wasn't Paz Vizsla, it wasn't Din, it wasn't Bo-Katan. It's like, who's the other significant character? And really, the armor is the only. And then, because whereas I think Casca and Axe are not, they're not really. They've been too minor and supporting for anybody to care if they turn out to be the spies. I think it's probably going to be the armor.
yeah, it's everybody's been saying that all along. I've been saying that the armorer has been holding back information from Din to a point where he's just completely in the dark. And I'm not fond of how she has been doing that. It would be quite ironic if she was. So you mentioned the forge. Let's talk about this great forge. I had no idea that the forge is the heart of the Mandalorian culture. And the first thing that I, of course, thought was about Lord of the Rings and the dwarves with their forge and how they had an incredible forge in the mountain. Um, but what did you think about it? Did it give you Lord of the Rings vibes? Um,
Oh
and
yeah, it's like going in there. It's like going into like the mines of Moria, and seeing all the forges and everything that have been completely, destroyed or just destroyed through time or whatnot, and seeing this, and it's like, man, that's like even when they're flying in there initially coming over Mandalore, and Paz Vizsla looks down and he's like, it's even worse than I imagined. And this one guy says, I was here when it happened, and it's like it keeps building up that sense of dread and foreboding as to what the Night of a Thousand Tears was like. And then you get to see the forge and how massive the thing is, and it's like, man, let's turn this back on, kind of like in the second Hobbit movie where the dwarves reactivate the forge in the Lonely Mountain. It's like this grandiose thing.
yeah, I thought they were going to turn it on as well. When they were talking about how it hasn't been lit since the purge, and I'm thinking to myself, they're going to light it. They're going to light it. Um, So, it's a very odd thing to see right there in the heart of right near the forge, right near the heart of Mandalorian culture is an Imperial base. Now, this was the last thing I thought I would see on Mandalore. And obviously, um, uh, Moff Gideon is utilizing it to harvest whatever Beskar he can and, use whatever he wants to so he can make what he needs for his fleet of dark troopers. But were you surprised to see this unbelievable, um, Imperial base in the heart of the Forge right there on Mandalore?
Uh, yeah, or considering that the other stragglers from the planet who they found on that makeshift ship didn't mention it. They're like, "Oh, we can take you right to the forge. We know where it is." And it's not much further down from there after they go to the forge that you have the base. So it's like, did they know about it? Because they didn't seem to be in on it. So I mean, I get well, it is a bit further down, so maybe they didn't know it was there. Like it's maybe Gideon's been stockpiling this, because you could see that his base is like deep underground in the caverns. So I guess because he has it right there, and then noticing which characters get trapped behind and which ones don't. It's like okay, because you notice, like you said, there was no Imperial fleet there to ambush them when they went back up there, and why not? Well, because you got the armor of the other spies up there. They don't need to.
Yeah, that's a good point. And of course, Din does get captured, which we don't really see very often. Um, and unfortunately, Heavy Mando sacrifices himself so everybody can get out. There's this moment where Moff Gideon boldly asks Bo-Katan, "Hey, give me back that dark saber and surrender like you did the last time." And she's like, "F that! I'm not doing that again." It's very interesting because. We see these guards. I think are those the three Praetorian guards, Catherine? That the guys in red, or are those other types of guards?
Those are Praetorians. They've been labeled that I've seen online. So those are as for whether or not these Praetorians are similar to Dark Troopers, where they're also like manufactured or not, or whether they're actual, normal individuals is up for grabs. But they had the same type of weapons, and they came in there, and it's like, oh, cool, we're seeing the Praetorians come along, which makes sense because we saw in season 2 how Gideon's laboratory had the Snoke vats there, and they played Snoke's theme music and that kind of thing. So we could see where that's leading. So that made sense that he has those guys there.
Yeah, well, he asked for it and got it, and I think he
Yeah.
felt he needed it, and I agree. Another thing that we saw was this the first time, Catherine, that we've seen stormtroopers, what looked like stormtroopers to me, with Beskar armor.
Well, they're not stormtroopers. Again, they're clones. They're other dark troopers, like you said, the next generation, and they're different. He says because they have me in them, his own DNA. It's like he's continuing this whole obsession of his own egotistical obsession, where all the new Mandalorian race is basically going to be comprised of his own clones, essentially. And he did give it a more imperial type of paint job to make it look all white and stuff, almost like the old prototype Boba Fett version from way back in '79 or '78. And so it's kind of neat to see that now that he's put them to use, because he's like they got all the Beskar, and as pointed out by the people in the comments, that those vampire-like droids, the scavengers, they were probably collecting Beskar for him for this project, and blood and DNA to feast off of that as well. And so, like Gary mentions, maybe they did see Din Djarin come earlier when he went to the waters, and they let him go in and leave because hey, this quest is going to help him bring the other Mandalorians to us. So yeah, go for it. So that's kind of I do wonder how the last episode obviously is going to be the reveal of who we expect the spy to be, and how that's going to fare for the rest of the Mandalorians. I mean, I take it they're not all going to get wiped out.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, the Heavy Mando
Paz Vizsla.
sacrifices himself so they can get out, and obviously, yes, as OG fan when Star Wars was just Star Wars says, right on, Catherine. The Heavy Mando ends up sacrificing himself. That was kind of hard for me to watch,
Mm-hmm.
but I guess they felt that somebody had to um, pass, and it couldn't be just where everybody survives this fight. But overall, how would you rate this episode? For me, I would say it's probably if not the best one of the series, in the top two.
It's up there. I give it like a like a 9, because I feel like when we get to next week's episode, it'll be similar to the ending of season 1, where I can't rank episode 7 or 8 of season 1 better than the other because it's like one half, like, and then the other half. So like the same thing is going on here, where episode 7 and 8 will basically be one big episode just split in half. So I still give it by itself a 9. Combined with what I expect from next week, combined both, they'll probably be a 10 when we see what happens next week. But yeah, that, especially that ending for Paz being taken down by the 3 Praetorians after being ambushed, and how Gideon was too much of a coward to fight himself. It's like he reopens the door, but then he takes off with his own jetpack. It's like, really, you want to start this whole new Mandalore, and you're not going to be willing to take down the chief? And like, you had all those Mandalorian dark troopers disarm Din Djarin, but you're not going to go in and deliver the death blow yourself. It's like, he's just a little coward. Yeah, he's just, and you can see now that the ego is getting to him. And I expect in the long run that'll be his undoing, either by one of the Mandalorians or perhaps even by Thrawn.
Yeah, I think it's
The
very
warlords
interesting.
won't like finding out what Gideon's been up to, you know?
Yeah, and I also think it's very interesting that, you know, as we were talking, it seems like Gideon wants to challenge Thrawn. He wants to challenge Thrawn's authority, but everybody on the council is in love with Thrawn. They feel like he's the one we need to follow. So, regardless, even if they're saying there's new leadership, I have a feeling that if Thrawn shows up, they're going to drop Gideon like a hot potato.
Oh yeah, because we heard it again at the beginning. The other officers were under the impression that, oh, there's still so many people loyal to the Empire, and they're criticizing him for cloning. It's like, you're the guys who are into cloning, but then again, they're into cloning Palpatine, as we know, because that's their backup plan down the line. But they don't want clone troopers. Like we saw what the First Order is comprised of, raising people from birth and brainwashing them, which is in a sense the perfect soldier, because unlike a clone where you have to rely on microchips and hope they work properly, or regular people where you just have to hope that they're loyal and not going to change their mind, when you brainwash somebody from birth all the way through and raise them like in a cult, that's a great soldier. Kind of like we see with Din Djarin and his own cult. So I take it that the other warlords are not going to be pleased to see what Gideon has been up to on Mandalore, creating all of these new Dark Troopers and sort of creating a cult around himself in a similar way that Darth Maul had done back in the Clone Wars. And so I take it that, yeah, if Gideon comes out of this on top, then I think the other guys are gonna betray him and seek Thrawn on him to say, shut this down.
Well, what was interesting is when Din was captured and Moff Gideon says, take him to interrogation. And I thought to myself, Din doesn't know anything at all. Like, why would you even want to interrogate him? He doesn't know anything. And then I thought to myself, gee, what if Din does actually know a whole hell of a lot? We just haven't seen it in this series. Like they haven't shown his intelligence or anything like that here, that he does know a lot. What do you think, Catherine? Is Din someone who knows a lot more than what we've been seeing on screen?
He could, because we've only seen him for a few. Like, we know that he was a child rescued during the Clone Wars, and so there's still a ton of time there, nearly 40 years, where we haven't seen what he's been doing, because he's about that. Well, not 40 years, about 30. So it's like 19, 20, say 23. So about 33 years or somewhat between him being rescued by the Death Watch by the Children of the Watch rather, and then being here. So he could have seen all sorts of things and been privy to all kinds of information that Gideon would want to know about.
Yeah, it is a good question, and something to think about, since he wanted him to be in a debriefing, which indicates to me he wants to know everything that Din knows for some reason. And I almost wonder whether Din's ancestry, we know that he's a Mandalorian and was a foundling, but I almost wonder there's something else about Din that was important. Maybe his ancestry, for some reason, was significant. But I'm not entirely sure if that's true or not. So, I know that we only have 45 minutes for this broadcast tonight, but is there anything else you'd like to say about this episode, Catherine, which was absolutely outstanding, and certainly what we were expecting from pretty much every episode, but didn't get of The Mandalorian this season?
Yeah, I thought it was really good. I surprised with the amount of exposition with Gideon and all those other warlords that's kind of somehow, because we haven't seen because he asked for backup and we haven't seen it yet, because the people who ambushed them were the dark troopers that he already had there. So I wonder if he's going to send, or if he's going to request that the backup go to Navarro, to, because he knows that's where they've been, because that's like Cal said, they've been hiding out in Navarro now. So I wonder if he's going to send the backup there to, wipe them off the map as a, punishment type thing. Because now that he knows about it, I mean, I don't think Navarro is necessarily long for this world, and since he's got a spy within the Mandalorian ranks, then clearly he doesn't necessarily have to send the fleet there to wipe them all out in one stroke. So I did think it was a great episode. A lot much better than last week because it wasn't just filler. Because I'm all for world building if it moves the story forward. But if it's just like what you had last week, which was like a Scooby Doo episode, basically, then it's like, oh hey, it's Christopher Lloyd. Oh hey, it's Jack Black. It's like, okay, it's like, I mean, then it doesn't really mean anything. It's like they could have used that real estate to expand on this whole finale that they're doing, which I would have preferred. But I do like the idea that they're starting to get along a little bit better. Like maybe they could, like whoever it is that said it, that like Bo-Katan says, that we're always strong together, but it's only when we're fighting each other so much that we fail, and that's the only time that happens. And they seem to get along. But I notice how the fact that the armor and certain people don't speak up about it made me think that she's definitely more like, again, she has the Maul horns on her helmet. She's super clearly from the Death Watch, because Paz Vizsla obviously is originally from Death Watch because of Pre Vizsla before him. And granted, Maul betrayed Pre Vizsla and killed him. That doesn't mean that Paz Vizsla and the armor didn't feel like they should be the ones to inherit that collective, if you will. So I'm really intrigued for next week and pumped for it. But this was a pretty good episode.
It really was. Another kind of interesting thing, and of course, after watching the episode, it becomes quite clear that Moff Gideon has been on Mandalore all this time, and pretty much this is his main location, his hub. And not only does he not want the Mandalorians to come back to Mandalore, but now the secret is out that he has this compound there. And this compound is pretty much something that's been so important for him. But now I think that when the rest of this Imperial crew finds out what he's been doing there, I think it's going to be jeopardize some of what he's doing as well.
That's a good point, because if he's been hiding out of Mandalore all this time, then like why did he even need the separate facility on Navarro? It's like I think he's been trying to spread it out because he's trying to hide it from the other warlords. It's like when he gave that big grandiose speech about what he wants to do, I think that's all him, and that like the others are definitely, the Imperials are definitely not going to be on board with that. But I don't think they're necessarily going to wrap it up next week. I think next week is going to have another cliffhanger ending, because to tease that Gideon escaped throughout this whole season and only just now bring him back. Like, there's no way they're killing him off next week. I would be shocked if they killed him off next week. I think he'll be around for a while, but who
and
knows?
my final thought is, well, Tom asked the question, does Moff know the Mythosaur exists? I think Moff knows everything that's on the planet of Mandalore. So for me, I would say yes. But one thing I think was very interesting, Catherine, is this was another episode where we saw giant creatures plaguing the Mandalorians. I never, excuse me, I never thought I'd see another creature. This one was even bigger than the last one. Catherine, what is it with these giant creatures and the Mandalorians? They can't seem to get away from them. Is the creature representative of something else, literally speaking, like literary wise?
Maybe it's sort of symbolic of how they've lost their way or something, because like they say, the whole myth of the mythosaurs, that the Mandalore harnessed it, broke it in and mastered it and trained it. And but then again, you see plot armor type stuff, because they worked very close together coherently in the episode where they had to take down the pirates. And granted, the pirates aren't big monsters, but they had big ships and everything, and they were still able to handle that. And yet, when it comes to monsters, or even like in the Land of the Lost episode, as we've been calling it, it's like they had problems with that. So I think it's mostly just inconsistent writing. Because like I remember we didn't cover last week, but when Axe Woves said that the reason he abandoned Bo-Katan was because she wants to retake Mandalore, and I thought, well, wait a minute, that was the game plan from the beginning when we first met them in season 2. So what's he talking about? It's like, again, it's inconsistent writing that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, and so it's been a bit sloppy, if you will. So It's unfortunate that you have those inconsistencies, but I just hope that next week it just, which is why I don't think they're going to wrap up all the storylines either. Like I'm pretty sure that the storyline of, is anybody in the New Republic going to realize that something went wrong with Pershing's, his memory wipe, and the fact that his whole memory is wiped can only have been done from somebody cranking that dial, and oh, she was the one left in there. It's like, no, that's clearly something that they're not going to pursue. It's just lazy writing. Uh,
Yes.
it's unfortunate when things like that happen, but that's where we're at.
It is unfortunate. Julian says he doesn't think Gideon could care less about the Mythosaur, has no idea. And he wants to know, why didn't Bo say to Gideon, "You want it? Come and take it from me, Sleemo." Uh, you know, I think
Yeah,
he's
she
going
should have
to
said that.
try. Yeah. And guys, Julian and I will be reviewing Picard season 3, episode 9 tomorrow at 7 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, which is uh, late tomorrow night. Um, but I wanted to thank you, Catherine, for joining me tonight. I know this is going to be a shorter show. Where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Sly Snide. You can find me on the Phantasmagorium Show YouTube channel. Tonight, Scott and I are going to be reviewing Spider-Man 2 at 6 Pacific, so come along with that. It'll be fun. And you can also find me on the Virtual Cantina Network every second and fourth Sunday of the month, live streaming at 8 a.m. Pacific, the show The Unifying Force, which is a Star Wars talk show. We took the weekend off for celebration because of all the news coming out there, but we'll have plenty to talk about. And with Visions season 2 coming around the corner, that'll be something fun to talk about. So yeah, we got a lot of content coming there.
Yeah, there is a lot of Star Wars content coming up. And guys, here's the link for the Phantasmagorian Show. It
Thank you.
is in the chat. So do please check out Catherine's channels as well as her shows. Guys, you can always find me here on Positive Fandom and on the Burnettwork, on Lorraine Creel channel, and on the 16 Scale Man Network. Just want to thank Tom Jr. Jackson, my moderator and collaborator and friend. We are all goof people. And guys, yeah, let's see how Mandalorian episode 8, the finale, happens, Catherine. I'm really curious as to how this is going to turn out. I hope they don't drop the ball on this one. Let's see what happens. So I just want to thank everybody for coming and showing up today. And guys, remember, no matter where you are in the galaxy, always remember to please be kind. Take care, everybody.